Today in class we talked about the difference between categorical data and numerical data, and we were exploring roller coasters, a survey involving roller coasters. We asked people about their preferences, if they wanted to sit in the front, the middle, or the back. We also asked them what was important to them about a roller coaster, things like airtime, speed, height, etc. So for homework, we're going to keep building on that. First, you're going to need to think about some of the classwork we did today and how to write summaries about that information. So make sure that page 13 is completed, and then we'll correct it with this section. We're going to start by writing two statements to summarize the data collected from the roller coaster survey. Also, we want you to try to use complete sentences. So there's a lot of different ways we could write statements here. Here would be a couple examples. One would be that most people surveyed like to ride at the front. Of a roller coaster. You could add some nuances to that too. You could talk about how, well, maybe other things, depending on how your class went, maybe your class was closer to wanting to sit in the back or a different spot. But overall, it seemed like most people surveyed liked to ride at the front. Additionally, it seemed like most people liked speed in a roller coaster. So those are two things that you could write statements about, but again, there's many, many more that you could also write. Next, we're thinking about how are summaries useful. So we like summaries as a way to make conclusions about the data. However, we do have to recognize that these are just samples, and they might vary. The answers that we came to, or the conclusions we came to, might vary if we asked a different 7th grade class or we asked a larger sample size, right? Maybe we could ask students that were at another school, for example, or we could ask multiple classes. So summaries are helpful so that we can make general conclusions about the data. But again, we have to note that the samples might vary, and so there might be different people we could ask that would come to different conclusions. Suppose 400 people ride a roller coaster in one day. How many of them would you predict want to sit at the front? Well, you might look at your percentages, your relative frequencies, and think about how when it came from the internet votes, the people that wanted to sit in the front were around 59%. When we talked to the 7th grade class, it was around 43%. And then your class might have been a little bit different. I know that my classes today, some of them were much, much higher actually than both of those. So you might need to think a little bit about what would be a good indicator to use to compare this. But if I'm looking at these two, I might be tempted to kind of pick something in the middle around 50%. And so this would lead me to think that out of the 400 people, that maybe about 200 people would want to sit in the front. However, again, this might have varied. In your class, you might have seen a much higher percentage, like 75% or 80% that wanted to sit in the front. And so you might have actually chosen to say more people than 200 would want to sit at the front. This is just a prediction, and again, this might have some variation between people. The following question was asked in the survey. What is your favorite amusement park ride? Roller coaster, log ride, Ferris wheel, or bumper cars? The table below shows the results from an internet survey and from 7th grade students at East Junior High and West Junior High. So we're going to start by finding the relative frequencies of the data and adding them to the table. This part here should say and add them. So sorry, that's missing. And so go ahead and fill in your table. So in this case, to find the relative frequency for roller coaster, I'm going to do 92 because 92 people preferred it out of 160, and that would give me 57.5%. And I'm going to just round that to 58%. The next one is 26 out of 160. That's going to give me around 16%. Ferris wheel is 22 out of 160. That would give me approximately 14%. And again, to find these, I'm taking 22 divided by the total here, 160. And then that gives me this decimal, 0.1375. And I'm going to kind of imagine multiplying that by 100 to make it a percent. So that would give me 13.75. And I'm going to say that's approximately 14%. So there's a few steps involved with finding those percentages. If you're having trouble finding them, make sure that you are following each step, right? And you might want to ask your teacher more about that because you're going to be finding a lot of percentages from here on out in this unit. Bumper cars should be 20 out of 160, and that's going to be a percentage of 12.5, or I'll round that to 13%. For total votes, if I add all of those up, I should get close to 100%. And you might notice if I add all of these, I get something that's a little bit more or a little bit less, again, due to rounding. But I do want it to add up to approximately 100%. Votes from East Junior High. You'll notice now we asked a different number of students. We asked 80. So I've got to be careful with noticing that. 42 out of 80, so the number of people that like roller coasters, is going to be around 52.5, which I'll round to 53%. People who prefer the log ride is 31 out of 80, and that would be around 39%. And the Ferris wheel, 3 out of 80, which would be about 3.7%. I'll round that to 4%. And then finally, 4 out of 80, that's the number of people that prefer bumper cars, is going to be 5%. And so again, if I add these up, I should get close to 100%. Again, it might be a little bit more or a little bit less based on rounding. Finally, let's deal with West Junior High. So again, now we have a different total. We have 60. So 36 divided by 60, or 36 out of 60, is going to give me 60%. Then I've got the log ride. So 14 out of 60 is going to give me 23%. For the Ferris wheel, I have 6 out of 60, and you might recognize that pretty automatically as 10%. And lastly, I have 4 out of 60, which would be equivalent to around 7%. So again, when I add all of those up, 7 plus 23 would be 30, plus 10 would be 40, plus 60 would be 100%. So now that we have our table completed, we want to write 3 or more statements comparing the data sets and use complete sentences. So we want to kind of challenge you to come up with some of these. I'm going to leave a question in here so you can write some of those out. And then hopefully tomorrow in class you can maybe look at some of the statements people wrote and see if they look accurate or not based on the data. So again, we're looking for statements that compare the data sets and that use the data from what you have here.